respect now. We'll turn it over to the Governor of the great state of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, Dr. Hinojosa, thank you for your very kind words, but I also want to thank you for your leadership here at the Dallas Independent School District. We have with us here today someone who is no stranger to the Dallas Independent School District, somebody who has been a guiding force in the effort that we're talking about here today, as well as a guiding force in advancing education across the state of Texas, and that, of course, is the person that I chose to be the commissioner for the TEA, Mike Morath. Thank you so much for being here with us here today. Well, Dr. Hinojosa, I want to go back to the time that you spent with us in the governor's office participating in these roundtables. I truly appreciate your candid and engaged involvement in that process. As you accurately articulate, this was a very robust discussion, both during the time when you were there as well as during the other days. It was essential in the immediate aftermath of the horrific shooting at Santa Fe High School that we do receive input from educators, from superintendents, from teachers, from students. We also needed input from law enforcement, from mental health experts, as well as school safety experts. And we needed information and input from advocates on both sides of the gun debate issue. And very importantly, we needed and received input from legislators across the state of Texas. This is the type of process that requires everybody to be involved, because everybody in this entire process and everybody in the state of Texas never wants to see another occasion where innocent children are gunned down in their own schools. Everybody is galvanized together to make sure that we begin to put together strategies that will ensure that we will be able to better protect our schools. No one provided a more powerful voice for those strategies than the victims themselves. I've had the opportunity to visit with more than 100 victims when you count both the students involved in the shooting as well as their parents and family members. Their hearts ache. Their minds are troubled. But candidly, their souls are resilient. I got to visit with them again yesterday when they first returned to school, and I am so proud and inspired by their strength and their resiliency and their commitment to move forward in their lives and make sure that the future of Santa Fe, as well as Santa Fe High School, is going to be brighter than it ever was before. Well, beginning on the day of the shooting and continuing through yesterday, I have had the opportunity to visit with hundreds of victims, and they have literally poured out their hearts. They have bared their souls, and they have shared their ideas. And I've learned through this process that we all share a common bond, and that is we want action to prevent another shooting like what happened at Santa Fe High School. Now, as Dr. Hinojosa pointed out, beginning last Tuesday, we had 3 consecutive days of roundtable discussions that generated ideas and strategies. And then after those 3 days of roundtables, for the past 5 days, my team has been working around the clock on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, distilling those strategies into solutions that will make our schools and our state a safer place. The result of the roundtables and the result of our discussions with the victims has led to this: the governor's school and firearm safety action plan. This document that we have created here in just the past few days is more than 40 pages, offering 40 specific recommendations about ways that we can make our schools and communities a whole lot safer. The recommendations include actions that can be taken right now, as well as proposals for lawmakers to consider as we proceed forward. The plan includes more than $120 million in funding strategies to help schools implement these solutions immediately at no cost to the schools. Going forward, some of the strategies will need additional funds appropriated by the legislature or additional allocations from the federal government. Now, one of the key demands heard from teachers, parents, and students during our roundtable discussions was the need for greater law enforcement presence at schools. One strategy to heighten law enforcement presence on campus at little or no cost is to establish collaborative working agreements with local law enforcement. This includes things like adding schools to regular law enforcement patrols, allowing officers to use campus facilities for routine breaks, or for them to have a room located at that school where they can fill out their reports. What this does is a force multiplying component so that there will automatically be more law enforcement on campus, such that if an active shooter situation arises, there will be additional personnel there to immediately respond to that tragedy. To assist in this process, my recommendations include the state offering matching grants of up to $10,000 per campus. Now, another demand that consistently came up during our roundtable discussions was the need for more school marshals. As one Santa Fe student said at one of the roundtables, she said, and I quote, "Arming teachers and not knowing who is armed, that is what we need." Her sentiment was shared by many students and parents, and for a very simple reason. When an active shooter situation arises, the difference between life and death can be a matter of seconds. Trained security personnel can make all the difference. My plan increases the number of school marshals by training more school marshals this summer at no cost to schools, and by proposing increasing the number of school marshals per campus. Now, when schools go about the process of expanding campus law enforcement, my plan prioritizes the hiring of retired or off-duty law enforcement officers or military veterans who are already trained in the safe use of firearms. Now, another recommendation to help schools expand law enforcement presence on campus is for them to work with the TEA to prioritize what is an additional $62 million in federal funding that can be used for law enforcement patrols. I spoke with the Education Secretary DeVos last week, and she said that this money is coming from additional funding for the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant Program. Now, that funding can also be used for other campus hardening strategies, such as for metal detectors or other hardening strategies, as well as for mental health and counseling strategies. Now, when it comes to school hardening strategies, one of the most talked about was reducing the number of entrances as well as controlling the exits. It's very simple. You have to know who is coming into the school, and you have to know who's leaving it. Now, another school hardening strategy, which was new, something that we learned about in the aftermath, especially of what happened in Santa Fe, is the need to install active shooter alarm systems. These alarm systems would work separate and different from fire alarm systems. And the confusion is dangerous. As a teacher explained to me yesterday, she said that when the fire alarms went off in Santa Fe, it compelled teachers and students to react the way they were trained, and that is to exit the classroom, go into the hallway, and try to exit the school. Well, as soon as they went into the hallway, they encountered gunfire from the shooter, putting themselves in danger. And so there needs to be a way to distinguish from a fire alarm, which compels one strategy, which is to exit schools, and then a different type of alarm system for an active shooter situation in which most schools train that you find ways to bunker down into your classroom or perhaps other strategies. Now, the plan that I am providing today also recommends expanding active shooter training and offers the program free of charge for the remainder of this calendar year. And another concern repeated at the roundtables was the need to prevent people from becoming shooters in the first place. And we provide in here several recommendations that help to achieve that goal. One recommendation is to expand the telemedicine, wellness, intervention, triage, and referral project. This is a project that is headed up by Texas Tech University. The program uses mental health screenings to identify students at risk of committing violence and then connects them with professionals for counseling as well as for further evaluation. It's known as the Twitter program, and it's used currently at 10 independent school districts with great success. Last week, on May the 23rd, it was announced that the program would be expanded to 12 additional school districts around the Amarillo area. Now, this program has identified and removed from schools students who posed an imminent threat of harm to others. It's also led to other benefits, such as decreases in truancy referrals, as well as fewer discipline referrals to schools. My recommendation includes that Texas provide $20 million to expand this program even further, eventually making it a statewide program. Well, in addition to mental health treatment, the plan also recommends strategies to prevent threats from turning into violence. One of those strategies is to expand campus Crime Stopper programs. Along those same lines, we are also working to make it easier for students to anonymously report threatening or suspicious behavior with an upgraded mobile app called iWatch Texas. This app will go active next month. Another recommendation is to expand fusion centers in Texas. These fusion centers help to identify threats that appear on social media and will help law enforcement to intervene before violence occurs. You know, it seems that after every one of these mass shootings, there were advanced warning signs that appeared on social media. We want to be able to view and aggregate and track those warning signs and use those warnings to disrupt the threat before it causes harm. Another recommendation is to improve school safety by way of removing threatening students from the classroom. Last session, I signed a law to remove teachers who assault students. Now I'm recommending a law to remove students who threaten teachers or other students. Finally, we must take steps to enhance gun safety in the state of Texas. Now, I doubt there's been a Texas governor with a more pro-gun record than myself. When I was the Attorney General, I helped to defend the individual right to keep and bear arms in multiple cases. I also did things such as authorize concealed handgun reciprocity agreements with more than 20 states. As governor, I've signed landmark pro-gun legislation every session. And I can assure you, I will never allow Second Amendment rights to be infringed. But I will always promote responsible gun ownership. And that includes keeping guns safe and keeping them out of the hands of criminals. Under current firearm storage law, child means a person younger than 17 years of age. Well, the murderer at Santa Fe High School was 17 years old, and thus his parents were not required by law to safely store their firearms. Changing the definition of child to include children aged 17 and younger would promote safer storage of firearms. Well, to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, my plan recommends that gun owners report when their firearms are lost or stolen. Reporting stolen firearms makes it easier for law enforcement to be able to identify firearms that are possessed by criminals. To more safely keep firearms out of the hands of people legally adjudicated to be mentally unfit to have a gun, Texas should require that courts report that mental health adjudication within 48 hours after it is issued, rather than the current 30-day time period to report that adjudication. When a court has rendered a person ineligible to purchase a firearm, that 30-day delay in reporting the mental health adjudication could prove deadly. Finally, I'm asking the Texas House and Senate to consider mental health protective order procedures that would allow law enforcement, a family member, a school employee, or a district attorney to file a petition in court seeking the removal of firearms from a person proven to be dangerous to himself or to others. Such removal could only be allowed after full due process is provided, and only for a specified limited time. Now let me conclude by saying this, and that is this plan, only a few items of which have I mentioned today. This plan is a starting point, not an ending place. It provides strategies that can be used before the next school year begins to keep our students safe when they return to school. This plan identifies $120 million in potential funding to begin this important work. The plan also provides strategies for the legislature to consider. The strategy that I most strongly encourage the legislature to consider is greater investment in mental health, especially in crisis intervention counselors. As long as mental health challenges trouble our children, there will never be enough safety barriers that we can build to protect our students. If, however, we can address mental health challenges faced by our students, it will do more than just make our schools safer. It will also build a better future for those troubled students, as well as for our state. This plan puts the state on a pathway to ensure healthier families, safer schools, and safer communities in the state of Texas. With that, I'll be happy to take a few questions.
Governor Abbott, a lot on the table there. What needs to be done absolutely immediately, and what can parents know that can change when they send their kids back to school?
Most importantly, parents need to know, and the things that can change immediately must change over the course of the summer, is for schools to ramp up the personnel and the strategies to show a greater law enforcement presence on school. They must work immediately on working with this Twitter program to expand access to these healthcare intervention programs that can remove troubling students from school. The person who was in charge of the Twitter program participated in our roundtables, and he articulated that it is very possible that this program, if it had been used in the Santa Fe school, it could have identified the shooter in advance and prevented that strategy. So it's important for schools to look at the multitude of strategies that we have in here, provided to them at no cost to them, for them to be better prepared. That includes other things such as active shooter training, things I did not mention in my remarks, such as going back over their school safety plan, which there are conferences this summer where educators have access to get updated on their school safety plan and begin the preparation for school safety drills as they prepare for the upcoming school year.
Governor, the about keeping hands away from children and those with mental health issues. Is that something we can do now, or does it require the legislature to act, and will it come to special session?
Well, first, with regard to some of the gun safety proposals, it will require legislative action. As one example, current Texas law provides that a child is defined as someone under the age of 17. My recommendation is to elevate that to define a child as under the age of 18. That obviously would require a statutory modification. There are some things that I didn't tell you in my remarks but are contained in this program that will be done immediately, and that is I will be actively engaged in a program to communicate with the public about the safe storage of guns, as well as the use of gun locks. Now, I'm not suggesting, and I would not promote, mandatory purchase of gun locks. I do have in my plan proposals for funding by the state, by grant program from the governor's office, to work with a proven organization to provide gun locks for all people who want it. It provides $1 million, which should provide, I think the mathematical calculation is 100,000 gun locks to Texans for free of charge, to encourage them to access those gun locks to keep their guns safe. And so there's a lot that can be done over the course of the summer before the school year begins. Well, the goal is to figure out the strategies and then go through the process. Another reality that we need to understand about the process, and that is if a special session were called next month, the reality is because of the way the timing works when laws become effective, none of the laws would be effective before the school year begins. That said, I'm not taking any strategies off the table, and I have been and will continue to work with legislators to build consensus on proposals. A special session is not a debating society. A special session exists for the purpose of passing laws. If there is consensus on some laws that could be passed, I'm open to calling one. Sure. I've had, first let me explain where the current money is coming from right now, and then I'll answer your question, and that is the $120 million I've talked about that we are able to access right now come from multiple strategies. One, they come from federal grants that will be received over the coming weeks. They refer to federal grants that have already been received that are currently in my office. They also refer to gubernatorial grant programs that I already have in my office, as well as certain funding strategies from various state agencies, such as HHSC or criminal justice divisions, things like, when I say HHSC, I'm talking about the Health and Human Services Commission, as well as some other agencies. With regard to funding, yes, I've spoken to leaders of both the House and Senate, and I will tell you my perception without putting words in their mouth, and that is there seems to be a consensus about a need to act, and the understanding that many of these actions will require additional funding by the state. There may be consensus about being able to allocate funding from the current budget for certain specified strategies if we can coalesce around what those strategies are, and that can be done before the next session. And then in the next session, as we get into looking at what all of our budgetary needs are, I think there is a high degree of interest to make sure that additional funding strategies are provided. Let me give you one example. I'm talking more about my perspective, and I don't want to put these thoughts into the minds of others. But a seemingly easy expenditure that doesn't cost a whole lot is to invest a whole lot more in this Twitter program because of the triage that it provides to make sure that we're able to remove from schools those who pose an imminent threat of harm to others. And that can be done at a relatively low cost as we expand it across school districts across the state of Texas. Also, I know that there's an interest in making sure that we do all we can to provide greater law enforcement presence and security in our schools. We have to be strategic in the way we provide that funding to make sure that it can be contained within our budget constraints. Well, and the answer is it depends. It depends on the extent to which these schools are able to provide their own matching funds as well as obtain other matching funds, let's say from local law enforcement. The best way this would work is for local law enforcement to be a part of this process. As I kind of mentioned earlier, there's this $62 million in additional federal grant money coming from the federal government that can be used for multiple strategies, including this strategy of local school districts using part of that money for matching the grant funding from the state of Texas.
Last question right here. Governor Abbott, a lot of recommendations here in that line. Is any of this mandatory? Because it seems like a lot of recommendations that you have there. Is there any kind of really smooth going through it? Get through from the minimum safety
Well, a lot of these are things that the state is going to be doing. In other words, the state working to expand the Twitter program, the state working on this social media assessment program. Well, here, let me give you an example. With the state operating the social media assessment, it is irrelevant whether or not a school adopts that. It is the state who has access to the information, and the state, through law enforcement means, will be taking action to intervene in the crime. With regard to certain things such as schools either expanding the school marshal program, schools participating in active shooter programs to make sure they are ready, schools taking action to harden their schools from possible attacks, such as by strategies like using metal detectors. There's no mandate in here. I will tell you this, however. I have had the opportunity to visit with countless superintendents as well as teachers and principals. There is no resistance to implementing measures. In fact, if you just peruse casually news stories over the past week or two in the aftermath of the Santa Fe shooting, you will see long before I came out with these strategies, there are multiple school districts across the state of Texas that have already announced that they are upgrading their standards for school safety. Leaders at schools want to keep their students safe. It doesn't take a mandate from the state of Texas to get schools, teachers, educators, and superintendents interested and focused on what they need to do to keep their students safe. What this does, what my program does, is provide more than $100 million to assist school leaders in doing what they are already wanting to do on their own. They don't need mandates from the state. They need assistance from the state. This provides them that assistance. Because students, teachers, educators, and law enforcement have all said it is a great idea. Students in Santa Fe said it is one of the programs they want to see. And if you talk to victims, especially victims in schools, they quickly grasp the benefits of the school marshal program. That said, when you have the opportunity to read the details of my proposal, it does not mandate the school marshal program in all schools. It suggests and provides funding for the expansion of the school marshal program. But we understand that when it comes to education, one size simply does not fit all. And so we understand that some schools may choose not to adopt it. To help encourage schools to adopt it, we want to provide the funding for the training so schools will not have to come out of pocket to be able to comply with the school marshal program. We want them to be aware of the value of the tool, encourage them to use it, but I do think it would be wrong to dictate that they adopt the program, because different schools have different needs. Thank you all.